Welcome back to Purpose Driven Church for Unificationists. This is day 64, and we are now looking at streamlining your organizational structure. If you remember from the last couple videos, we're talking about turning members into ministers, helping people to find their ministry, and recognizing everybody needs to have their own ministry for their own fulfillment and spiritual growth and maturity. So he says that the next step in building your lay ministry after teaching the biblical basis for it is to streamline your organizational structure. One major reason many church members aren't active in ministry is because they are so busy attending meetings, they have no time left for real ministry. I don't know if this is necessarily an issue for us locally, but it might be. Definitely other places for sure. He says, my guess is that the average church would be healthier if it eliminated half of its meetings to allow more time for ministry and relational evangelism. One of the reasons church members don't witness to their neighbors is because they don't know them. They're always at church attending meetings. According to the survey they did, Americans have less discretionary time in the 1990s than they had in the 1970s. At that time, the average American had 26.2 hours a week in leisure time in 1973, but in 1987 it dropped to 16.6 hours, and it's even less now. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. He says the most valuable asset people can give to your church is their time. He says if somebody comes to him with time, he says you have to really make sure you're going to use it in a way that's going to be fulfilling for them. He says, if someone comes to him and says, Pastor, I have 4 hours a week to give to my church and ministry, he says the last thing I would do would be to put him on some committee. I want to get him involved in ministry, not maintenance. Teach your people the difference between maintenance and ministry. Maintenance is quote-unquote church work, budgets, buildings, organizational matters, and so forth. Ministry is the work of the church. The more people you involve in maintenance decisions, the more you waste their time. Keep them from ministry and create opportunities for conflict. Maintenance work also conditions people to think that their responsibility is fulfilled by simply voting on church business. A common mistake made by many churches is to take their brightest and best people and turn them into bureaucrats by giving them more meetings to attend. You can drain the life out of people by scheduling constant string of committee meetings, etc., etc. We have no committees at Saddleback. We do, however, have 79 different lay ministries, probably a lot more now. What is the difference between a committee and a lay ministry? Committees discuss it, but ministries do it. Committees argue, ministries act. Committees maintain, ministries minister. Committees talk and consider, and ministries serve and care. Committees discuss needs, and ministries meet needs. Committees also make decisions that they expect other people to implement. To Saddleback, the implementers are the decision makers. The people who do the ministry get to make their own decisions about that ministry. We don't give decision-making authorities to those who don't minister. Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Who then does the maintenance at Saddleback? The paid staff do it. This way we won't waste any of our members' valuable time. People really appreciate the fact that the time they volunteer is given to actual ministry. I'm sure you realize how radical this approach is. Saddleback is structured in the exact opposite way of most churches. In a typical church, the members handle the maintenance and administration of the church, and the pastor is supposed to do all the ministry. No wonder the church can't grow. The pastor becomes the bottleneck. There is no way one man can minister to all the needs of a church. He will eventually burn out or have to move to another church for relief. He says, let me ask you this question. What do the words committees, elections, majority rule, board members, parliamentary procedures, voting, and vote have in common? None of these words are found in the New Testament. I don't think they're found in Father's words either. None of these, we have imposed an American form of government on the church, and as a result, most churches are bogged down in bureaucracy as our government is. It takes forever to get anything done. While the kind of structure a church has does not cause growth, it does control the rate and size of the growth, and every church must eventually decide whether it is going to be structured for control or structured for growth. I remember the first time I read this really struck me, and it's something that I've really been thinking a lot about. But let me just read that one more time. Every church must eventually decide whether it is going to be structured for control or structured for growth. This is one of the most crucial decisions your church will ever face. For a church to grow, both the pastor and the people must give up control. The people must give up control of the leadership, and the pastor must give up control of the ministry. Otherwise, each party can become a bottleneck for growth. It's kind of interesting because when you look back at the last, I don't know, 5-10 years of our church, we see more and more and more like bureaucracy become a part of the church, whereas, obviously in the past it was all based on like True Father's leadership, and of course there was leadership and there was the local leadership and there was a structure and things like that, but it was more centralized. And I think that we've kind of gotten away from that because people were so disheartened with abuse of power, abuse of money, scandals, just lack of faith and trust in their leaders, and also constantly changing leadership. So you couldn't really depend on leadership. But looking forward in the time to come, we have to really think about, we have to really ask ourselves the question, do we want to grow or do we want to just have control? Do we want things to stay safe? Do we want things to maintain the status quo? Or do we really want to accomplish something? And if we really want to accomplish something, then we really have to look at our structure. We have to look at all the different aspects. I'm not saying we necessarily will or have to do a certain thing, but it's really food for thought. We really kind of have to ask ourselves, is the direction that we've kind of gone, is that actually helping us or is that hindering us? Let's see. I don't have much time left, but let me just finish with this. He just emphasizes that once your church grows beyond a certain point, no one person can do everything. He says he doesn't need to know it all. He doesn't need to control everything. His job is to lead. And there's a very difference between leading and controlling. He says if you're serious about mobilizing your members for ministry, you must streamline your structure to maximize ministry and minimize maintenance. Fulfillment comes from ministry, not maintenance. Having God use you to change lives will change your whole attitude. He uses the analogy of people on the war. People on the front line, even though they're living the most difficult life, they have the highest morale and camaraderie, whereas people down in the back are arguing and griping about the quality of the food, etc., because they're not actually doing the frontline work. So he says that when he meets like critical Christians or people who are really irritable, cantankerous, he says, he usually discovers that they're not involved in the ministry, and he finds that the biggest complainers in any church are usually committee members with nothing to do. Very interesting. Okay, so that's all I can do today, so thanks a lot and see you tomorrow.